You're going.
Okay. I have been searching for love and God the majority of my 75 years. What I really learned is what I was looking for was a significant equal. And what's a significant equal? It's someone that you get back from as much as you give. It's someone where your intimacy, and I call it into me you see, survives conflicts without fear of withdrawal. It's a partnership where passion, consistency lubricates a regular sex life. Significant equals are intellectually matched. They never run out of things to say. They're joined not only at the hip, but the cerebral cortex. And the first person in my search for a significant equal was my father, of course. This is my daddy, Jack Wilkin, who used to be an amateur golf championship, duplicate bridge player, raconteur, womanizer, married to my mother, Mary, who was a Catholic school teacher. That was the first mismatch made in heaven that was modeled for me. My next person on a search that I met when I was 19 away at college at Chico State was Pete Hansen. He was a music major and a long distance runner, and his middle name was Solitude. And life became boring with him, even though we did marry when I was 20 years old in a church on the corner of First and Normal Streets. But we had a do-it-yourself divorce 5 years later. And he passed away just a few years ago. And there was a memorial celebration parade in Colfax, California, where we used to live. My next marriage, actually, in my search when I was 29, after I'd moved out of New York City, tired of turning up weirdos in the Village Voice ads. And he looked like a cookie cutter of husband number one. Both were bald, had curly blonde hair. And in our wedding in 1979, we marched down the aisle from the house that I had been restoring to Elton John's funeral for a friend. And with Steve, I had done the S training, and I knew he would father the two blonde-haired boys I wanted, but we had a mutually agreed upon divorce. And the next is my single and Sex and the City years, when I was ages 40 to 49. I call it the, if it feels good, do it, full of affairs, especially one with the editor of the LA Times that taught me that vulnerability was very important. So in the early 90s, I had recurrent dreams about returning to Chico State. But first, I had met in my Sex and the City single years, Peter, who was a Broadway dancer on the cast of 1776. And the title of my chapter in the next book about him is From Meeting God on a Train and Kicking Him Out of My House 6 months later. He was a fabulous cook and babysitter for those children, but eventually he did die of AIDS. And my next person in that single period is my friend Phyllis, I returned to Chico State to teach sex, drugs, and rock and roll at the place I learned about it when I went to college as a teenager. And it was the heyday of the 12-step movement, and I worked those 12 steps in 3 of them. And in one of those meetings, I met white-haired Gary, who looked like Chris Christopherson, who had good toys and a house in Tahoe. But my therapist told me she represented the addictions I was working to give up. So I talked about Peter. I didn't give you pictures of Daniel, who I met in one of those 12-step meetings, actually a Sex and Love Addict Anonymous meeting. And he didn't fit the picture. He had a scraggly beard and was bald, but he worshiped me and called me Matricia, and called sex worshiping at the gates of the temple. I let him chop wood and carry water to my house, which was on 1269 Storybook Lane in Paradise, California. But my therapist recommended me that while everybody needs a wife and a good codependent, I didn't really love him. And finally, I met Larry, significant equal found, someone who met all my criteria, and that we actually married in 2001 on May 6th, the 7-year anniversary of the time we met, and we called our wedding the 7-year hitch. So the final and continuing steps in a search for significant equal are learning to love yourself. And at different ages and levels of maturity, I learned how to love the most spiritually ordained relationship of all, and that is my relationship with men, women, and God, God in and as through us. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Let's give another warm round of applause for Pat.